Word of Faith Church of the Apostolic Faith. I'm Bishop Gerald Williams. Before we go into our service today, we'd like to give you our order services. Our order services is as following. Every Sunday, service starts at 10 a.m. Wednesday, Bible study begins at 7 p.m. Our location is 1455 Wigmore Street in the beautiful city of Jacksonville, Florida. Our zip code is 32206. Our phone number is area code 904-358-6722. Today's word is using what you have. Using what you have. We live in a time where there are those that utilize their talents, their gifts, and their abilities, and they're being successful. And then there are many of those that has talents and has abilities that don't use it. But we as people that are believers, are people of faith, we have to use what God gives us. And what He gives us is faith that moves mountains. He gives us faith that moves mountains. And when we utilize our faith, we can be successful, both spiritually and naturally. Spiritually and naturally. There's a lot of unease, a lot of unrest, because the distribution of wealth, who has it and who don't have it. But the Bible tells us, he that is faithful in least is faithful in much. He that is unfaithful in least is unfaithful in much. So when we utilize what we have, you'll be amazed at just through watching YouTube. And I watch it sometime, and I see those that go into the wilderness, and they just use simple things as sticks and rocks and plants. And they uses it, and they survive. Why they survive? Because they use what they have. And when we use what we have, we can be successful also. When I was a young man, there were those, especially of my culture, that didn't have a lot. And you wonder, how did they survive? They used what they had. You'd be surprised. When I was young, my mother didn't have a lot of money, and she worked as a cook in a hospital called Duval Medical Center in Jacksonville, Florida. We didn't have a lot. But she would use the little money she had, and she would go buy food. And she would buy, believe it or not, what y'all go and buy now, and y'all, it's a delicatessen to you. She'd buy gizzards, she'd buy livers, she bought chicken bags, all kind of things to just make a meal for her children. So she used the amount of money she had in order for her family to succeed or be successful or eat so that they wouldn't be hungry. Today we have an abundance, but we don't use what we have. We have a spirit of jealousy. We're watching someone else's yard and we're upset because we don't have it, but not taking pleasure in our own yard. We have a nice car, but yet we won't drive it because we want a better car. See, what you have is never good if you don't use it. What good is a car if you don't drive it? What good is lights if you don't cut it on? What good is food if you don't cook? Just think about it. When you use what you have, and if we look into the Word of God, you're going to see that God's people use what they had. And I'd like for you to get a pencil and paper and follow along with me and just write it down. I find that those that are going to be good Christians or great Christians that are able to help others, first got to learn to help themselves. You know, we talked about something this week, and it was a word, we talked about was, being ignorant or willingly ignorant. See, there's two differences in that. One, they chose to be that way. The other is just information that had not been delivered to them. So when you're willingly ignorant concerning something, it means that you refuses to accept knowledge. We say we want to be saved. We say we want to be Christians, but yet you don't want to read the Bible. And when you do come to church, you don't want to bring a pencil and paper, you don't want to bring a Bible. Well, how do you expect to be a good Christian if you don't come to learn? Everywhere you go to learn. So you learn to utilize this word right here. Because all of us are going to go through trials and tribulations. We're going to have ups and we're going to have downs. But we can go to this book right here and we can find encouragement and we can find help in our time of need. So when you read in the book of Exodus 14 and verse 16, you'll read about Moses. What Moses did. Moses used what he had. Moses used what he had, and that's what God gave him. It was a rod. Chapter 14 verse 16, he used a rod and he parted the Red Sea. That's all he had was a rod. You read in the book of Judges, the 15th chapter, 14th through the 16th verse, you will see something. The strongest man that was in the world, as soon as he got to Lehi, the strength and the power of God came upon him, and that he was bound, and the things that was upon him, they melted and burned like fire. And Samson took a jawbone of an ass. He took a jawbone of an ass and slew 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. You know what he did? He used what he had. That's what he used. He only had a jawbone of an ass, and he used that to kill 1,000 Philistines. We read in the book of 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, the 49th verse. You will see that David used a stone, or we call a rock, and he slew the giant Goliath with a stone, a rock. Just think about it. The Bible said the rock that followed him in the wilderness was Christ. And so when you're thinking about it, they utilized what they had. They didn't say, well, David said, well, if I had 1,000 men to help me go and slew this giant, then we would be successful. No. David had confidence. And David had trust in his God. And he knew what his God can do. So he took what he had. You know, when you think about Saul, he wanted to put all his armor and all that on David. David said, no, I've not yet proven that. He didn't take what Saul gave him, but he used what he had. He used a sling. He used a rock. And he slew the Philistine giant. We read in the book of Matthew, the 17th chapter, 26th verse. You see that Jesus paid taxes out of a fish mouth. He paid taxes. Why? Because they was wondering, did he pay taxes? And he spoke with Peter and asked him, do strangers pay taxes? And he said yes. And so he sent him down to a brook and told him to reach down into a fish mouth. And he paid taxes. So what he did, he used what he had. And I'm going to just ask you a question. Are you using what you have? A lot of times we feel disenfranchised. We feel like those that are around us, they are oppressing us and stopping us from being successful. When I was a young man, I only had about $45. And we were doing pretty bad at that time. We didn't have a lot of money. Our bills was just coming in left and right. And I can remember, I was thinking, how did I survive when I was a young man? You know, because my mother didn't have a lot of money. My father was dead. I said, I used to buy my school clothes with a lawnmower. I can remember that. And there was a man that was selling used lawnmowers. I took the $45 that I had, and I went and bought a used lawnmower. And with that used lawnmower, I purchased another lawnmower, and I purchased another lawnmower. Because I went and started cutting yards. I started a lawn service. I used what I had. And through that, I bought me a house. Through that, I bought me a brand new car. Through that, I bought me a brand new truck. Because I utilized what I had. You may have something right now. And you may feel sad. You may feel depressed. But just start thinking about using what you have. Someone says someone else's junk is somebody else's treasure. And they're saying they're broke. But all they had to do was go in their house and use what they had. Just use what they had. Things they're not using. Maybe them shoes that maybe it's too big for, or too small for your child, you could sell those for $5. Or maybe the dress that you don't like no more, you could sell that for $10. Just, you know, and you'll be able to pay bills that you wouldn't normally be able to pay. Just using what you have. Some of you are great cooks. I watched this lady, her name is Paula Deen. You know what she does? She used the talent she had to cook. And now she's on television, she writes books. But a lot of us sit home and say what someone is not doing, but not using the talent we have. See, God is not one that will give you something and then expect you not to use it. When you look in the book of John, the 6th chapter, the 9th verse, you know, there was a multitude was following Jesus, and that Jesus said, no, don't send them away hungry, except they faint. But there was a lad there that, you know, that gave what he had. What was that? He had 5 barley loaves of bread and 2 fish. See, he gave what he had. And Jesus used what he had, and he fed 5,000 men. And then also there was fragments left. You got to use what you have. Not thinking about what you don't have, but use that. And through that 5 barley loaves of bread and those 2 fish, he fed 5,000. In the book of Acts, the 13th chapter, there was a man called by Jesus. He was a sorcerer, or we would call a false prophet. He sought to stop the deputy from receiving the word of God. And what did Paul use? Paul used a word of faith. See, that's what we have. We have faith. In the book of Habakkuk says, the just shall live by his faith. And so he spoke a word by faith and spoke blindness on him, and that he went blind for a season and needed someone to lead him out. See, Jesus told us, you know, that if we have the faith, a lot of times what we're dealing with doubt, and we're dealing with insecurities. See, it's easy to ride on someone else's faith. It's easy to talk the talk, but can you walk the walk? That's the difference. You get a group of people together, and you'll find those that can talk, and whatever they say sounds good. But it's easier to talk on somebody else's faith than it is for you to talk about your own faith. Can you create for your own self? Do you believe that you could make it? Do you think that you can succeed? And that means that you're going to have to use your own talent, your own gift, your own abilities. Otherwise, it's just smoke. And that means use it. If you're a writer, you ought to use your abilities to write. If you're a cook, you ought to use your abilities to cook. If you're a motivational speaker, you ought to use your gift to encourage people. If you're an athlete, you ought to use your athletic abilities. Whatever you have, use what you got. Because God gave every man gifts, talents, abilities. He did that. God is not a respecter of person. And that's why I said be faithful of the few things. You know, they say, well, I wish I had me another car. But yet you don't clean the one you got. I wish I had a bigger house. You don't fix the one you have. You know, they got a beautiful yards on the south side, but do you cut your grass on the north side? You know, I always hear people, I want to move over there where everything is nice and everything is good. When they don't use what they have, they don't take care of the things they have. You'll be surprised. They don't paint their house. They don't cut the grass. They don't clean their house. They just come walk straight in the house. And then says, I'm going to move. And then they brag about, I'm moving over here. I moved over there. Because they don't take care of theirs over here. Whoever you are, you're going to take that person wherever you go. Whoever you are, you're going to take that person everywhere you go. I often tell our guys, I say, you know what? A neat painter is neat everywhere he goes. A good painter is good wherever he goes. A dirty person is dirty everywhere he goes. A sorry person is sorry wherever he goes, because that's who he is. But when the person has special qualities about himself, he learned how to utilize whatever he has for the betterment of not only himself, but the betterment of someone else. And that's why the Bible tells us how we shouldn't think of ourselves, but think on the things of others, more so than we do ourselves. And when somebody look at you and see you utilize your talents, your gifts, and your abilities. I can remember I sold one of my houses I had. And I made more money than the person that bought the house that I had. And I was driving this truck that the floor was, was rotting out. Air was coming out from right up under the bottom. I made more money than he did. But he was driving a brand new car. He had just bought my house. And you know what? God began to speak to me in reference to that. See, that man had faith to believe God for much more. I was driving that truck because I didn't think I can get anything more. I was accepting whatever was handed down to me. And when I saw that, faith just kicked in and said, you know what? I'm going to get rid of this truck. And I'm going to go get me a better truck. See, that's what faith said. Faith is an action word. See, it said, now faith. For you that's watching me right now, now faith. It's the substance of things hoped for. Evidence of things that are not seen. And the Bible said, without faith, it is impossible to please God. It takes faith. And see, even when we think about, things in life and what's going on today, look here. It says, now you are saved by faith, not of works. There's nothing you could do to merit what God have already done. See, now I'm saved by faith. I don't have to work to get saved. I just got to believe by faith that Jesus came here and died and rose on the third day. That's all I got to do, is have faith in the things in which he have done. And if I look up by faith, believe by faith, that I can be saved. And I know there are those that question it because they feel it's something they got to do. But on that cross, he said, it's finished. It's finished. Meaning everything has been done. Everything is done. And now, only thing I got to do is just trust in him and believe in him. And that everything is going to be all right. And that's why I believe by faith that no matter what I go through one day, my next day is going to be better by faith. Because it said, weeping endure for a night, but my joy will come in the morning. The darkest hour is just before the break of day. Because that's what I believe by faith. I believe when things get bad, it opens the door for things to get better. That's according to your faith. But when you put your head down and start saying, oh, it's going to be this way, or ain't nothing that I can do to help me, can't nobody help me, you've already spoke that into your life. But I'm believing by faith right now that things is about to change for those that are listening to this broadcast, because they're beginning to think right now about what do they have that they can use to make things different or make things better, not only for themselves, but for those that are around them. See, they're using what they have. You know, there are those that didn't have a blueprint, but they sure used the talent they had. They built the house. Just think about it. How can you build a house without a blueprint? You use what God gave you. Instincts. Common sense. Just think about it. There was a man called Moody, and that he opened Moody Bible College, even though he didn't have an education. Ain't that something? Just think about it. But he used what he had. And what do you have you are not using today? And who are you blaming for your problems and circumstances and situations? But I guarantee you, you can point out everyone's mistakes and failures and shortcomings. Because when we're doing that, we're really running from ourselves. But when we're looking at all these men, you look in the book of Second Kings, the 6th chapter. You know, there was the sons of the prophets, and that the place they dwelled was too small, and one borrowed an axe from one of the neighbors. And what happened? It fell, and he came to Elisha, and he said, "My Lord, the axe." And so he asked him, where did it fall? And he said, a certain point. He took a stick, pointed into the water, and the axe began to swim. He used a stick, and the axe swam from the bottom of the water. See, that's how things can change by faith. When you use what you have. And the Bible says in Romans 14, verse 23, what does that say? Anything that's not of faith is sin. If it's not of faith, it's sin. So therefore, when you start saying that God can't do it and God won't do it, then that becomes sin to you. That becomes sin. Why? Because you don't trust in the handiwork of God. You are saying what our God can't do. And even sometimes we say things, but yet we do not believe it. But when we start utilizing what we have, let's turn to the book of Matthew, the 25th chapter. Matthew 25 and verse 14. And verse 14. Did you notice something I found out? Some of the most gifted people have talents, gifts, and abilities. Your legacy should be what you leave behind. But when they die, those gifts, those talents, those abilities go in the grave. There were men that were very talented, decided to do things the wrong way and sell drugs and got killed. That talent was never utilized. They never got a chance to use what they had. Even those that take others' lives of great young people that are smart and bright and intelligent. They go to schools and shoot up hundreds of kids and children. A scientist died, an architect died, a nurse died, a doctor died. They never get a chance to use the talent or the abilities that they have. And when you don't teach someone else or spend time with someone else, whenever you leave, when you die, whatever that gift or talent you have, it ceases right there. When it can still be going on and going on because you handed it down to someone else. You know, there are some lawyers in Jacksonville, and I think it's Morgan and Morgan, Bonds and Bonds, Coins. Their father were lawyers, and they handed it down to their children, and now their children are lawyers. Even though their father, some of them might be living or might not be living, but whatever they had, they gave it to their children, and they're still using it. What are you giving yours? What are you handing down to yours? What talent you using? What abilities you are using? It's easy to find fault. If you're trying to find it. Even some may look at me and you can find fault with me. But I ain't going to try to find fault in you. I want to encourage you. I want to build you up. Help you become the best individual person you could be. Look in the jail. Some of the most gifted, some of the most intelligent people are behind bars. Their gifts, their talents will never be utilized out here. Because while they was out here, they didn't use what they had. There is no shortcuts. You know, I found that when people try shortcuts, they got to go do it all over again. You know why? Because they was trying to find an easy way rather than doing things the right way. That's from the very first beginning. And so when we're looking at it over here in Matthew's, the 25th chapter, the 14th verse, it says, For what the kingdom of heaven is as a traveler into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another he gave 1. And he gave everyone according to their several abilities. Now I want to tell y'all something about that. I want to go and read all of it. The one that had the 5 talents, he went and used his. He put those talents to work. He made 5 other talents. And so when you're looking at people today, and there's a place called Silicon Valley. Those are some very highly intelligent people. They create things for Apple. They create things for YouTubes and different things, cell phones, the television. Those are some high-tech young people. But it's those talents they have. And one thing about talent I found out, some people have it, and they utilize it to beat down other people. Oh, you're not as smart as me. Oh, you're not as great as me. You are not better than me. They use that to look down on others. But did you know that talent, it comes from God? It comes from the Lord. No one, when there was a child, says, I'm going to be a doctor. Oh, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a scientist. That talent, it came from the Lord. And those talents were there to utilize to help people. Even in ministry, there are those that are pastors, prophets, teachers, and evangelists, for the perfecting of the saints, for the edifying of the body of Christ, until we come into the unity of the faith and into the knowledge of the Son of God. That is for everyone has a talent and an ability to equip the saints. And your talents and your abilities, they are there, amen, for you to help mankind. Everyone's talent, even our body, is there for a specific use. Your eyes is there to see. If you use our eyes, they will see. If you use your hands, they will work. If you use your feet, they will help you walk. Every part has a specific job to do. But what if one doesn't use it? Then it affects the rest of the body. And when you start using your abilities and what God has given you, you won't have time to blame someone else. Because we'll be using what God gave us for the betterment of not only ourselves, but for those that are around us. So let's think about it. Are you using what you have? Moses used his rod. David used his rock. Samson used that jawbone of that ass. Elisha used that stick. Jesus paid taxes with a fish. The young lad used his 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And Saul, Paul, used a word of faith and spoke it and blinded deaf and blind by Jesus, a sorcerer, to stop him from hindering the deputy from hearing the word of God. When I think about that, here's some of you in here may have 5 talents. Some of you may have abilities. But I want to ask you a question. When the last time you used what you have? When the last time you put it to work? When the last time you utilized what you have to enhance someone else other than yourself? Or will you be like Elisha? Elisha died, and his gift went with him. He was so anointed that when they put him in the ground, a dead man fell on him, and the anointing was still in his bones, and he rose back up. Are you going to die with your gift, your talent, and your abilities? Or when you leave here, your gift, your legacy will live on? Thomas Edison, the phone. The Wright brothers, the plane. They're still living on. Someone made it better. J.P. Morgan, stocks. Folks are still using stocks. Did y'all know that? You look at Rockefeller was oil. Folks still using oil. A lot of these things that people done, people are utilizing it today. Martin Luther King's birthday is this week. How many of us is following? He used his talent to speak and motivate and encourage people. I thought about that speech that he made. Is when you look at it, it kind of reminds us of Moses. Moses spoke to the people, and because God had told him, because God told Moses to prophesy to that rock, and Moses got angry and he smote the rock. And God told him, said, Moses, you're not going to lead the people to the promised land, but he allowed him to see it. And Martin Luther King, when you think about it, you know what he said? He says that he may not get there with them, but he said he had been to the mountaintop. See, he seen it. He said, but we as a people will get there. See, but he used that speech. It was one of the most encouraging speeches that anyone have ever heard. And it still motivates people today. I want to say to you, what would it take to motivate you or encourage you to use your abilities to help others? He said, but I may not get there, but we as a people will get there. Because he said he'd been to the mountaintop. That it wasn't about one group of people, but he said the Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics will come together. Politics separate people. It separates people because now I won't agree with you because I agree with this and I agree with that. I agree with mankind. That everybody deserves an opportunity to utilize their talents and their gifts and their abilities in this country. That's why it is called America. The greatest country in the world. For those who have not traveled outside of this country, why is so many people trying to get here? If it was so bad. But when we use our talents, our gifts, and our abilities, we enhance this country. And when we use what God gave us, we elevate this country because righteousness exalts a nation. Sin is a reproach against any people. And notice something. Martin Luther King was a religious man. He was a pastor. He talked about social justices, but he also talked about Jesus. He understood that when he died, that there was another place for him. We got those that now says, well, we don't want to talk about Christianity. But God gave some of you all gifts to motivate people and encourage people in the faith. I can remember I was at Eartha White's, and there was some young men in wheelchairs, and there was old people in wheelchairs. Some of them, because of the medication they was taking, they kept them so sedated that they never got out of the wheelchair. They lost their will to walk. They would never walk. And when God blessed me to go there, to minister a word, and I can remember that word, and some of you all was there, and the message was, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? And it was talking about how that the Lord was on the inside of this house. And that there was a man that was lame. And they couldn't get in through those doors. And they couldn't get in through the windows. So they tore the roof off and dropped the man down to Jesus in order for him to heal him. And the topic was, how bad do you want it? How bad did they want that man to be healed? they found a way to get him to Jesus. And when they heard that, I can remember I was saying, how bad do you want to walk? And there were those that was in the wheelchair. They hadn't walked in years, began to get out the wheelchairs. And there was, I can remember there was an old lady that had no legs. She heard the message. And I can remember she was trying to get out the wheelchair and her little legs was doing like this. She forgot she didn't have legs and didn't have feet. But she heard the word, she heard the message. She was having an out-of-body experience. She forgot about what she didn't have. And she started thinking about what she had. She began to believe she could walk by faith. And I'm trying to tell you right now, when you begin, if God has given you a gift, a talent, and any abilities, sometimes it's just for you to utilize it to encourage people to believe God by faith. Utilizing your talent, utilizing your ability. If you're a teacher, you ought to be teaching. That's if you're a preacher, you ought to be preaching. If you have the gift of faith, you ought to be encouraging others and using your faith. Whatever you ought to be using it. And so he gave this man 5 talents, and he utilized those 5 talents. He gave one 2, and he utilized those 2 talents. And then there was one that had that 1 talent. That 1 talent. He didn't utilize his. See, that's, like us, well, I ain't got nothing but you got something. But you got something. May not be as much as others. May be like my mom, didn't have much. But she took that little money she had and she went and bought chicken backs and rice and came home and made a pearl of rice. That's what she did. She utilized what she had. Y'all ever heard a word called chitlins? I hear people, I don't like chitlins. But slaves did, because they would take the best of the food and they gave them the chitlins, which was the intestines of the hog. And I'm going to tell you something I know about that, because I know how poor we was. And I cleaned them one time. They went to dig a hole into the ground because we were so poor. My mother tucked those chitlins. My father was dead. I know folks don't like to hear it because they cannot deal with that, because they cannot see themselves struggling. We like to talk about all the things what someone has oppressed us and what we went through. But you don't like to hear the facts about it from those that are around you. It's like, there we go again. Well, if they hadn't went through, you wouldn't be here today. They had to go through for you to make it. They had to go through for you to have it. I didn't talk down to my mom when she told us to dig that hole and why do I have to clean chitlins? Well, I'm going to tell you how you do it. She took what she had. We didn't have no food. She had those chitlins that dug a hole in the ground. And you had to do it like this. Put it like that. And whatever in those intestines came out into the ground. And she took them and she washed them. And she cleaned them and she cooked them. And we ate them. That's what happened. That's what happened. She took what she had. And then there were times where she could only get a little small chicken. She didn't have a big chicken. But in that chicken, they would pack it in the back. They would have the livers in the back. They would have the gizzards in the back. And they would have the necks in the back. So she would cut that whole chicken up with the livers, with the gizzards, and all. And she would cook them. And that's what we would eat that night. Let me tell you something. She used what she had. And I'm here to tell you right now, you have more talent, more abilities than they ever had, and more opportunities. But we spend our time looking and saying what we don't have. Utilize what you got until you get what you want. So this one took his 1 talent. He dug it and put it in a hole. Why did he do it? Because his thought was that that if he don't come back, he'll take it and he'll keep it for himself. But he didn't want to work. Didn't want to use it. So we're looking at 26th verse. Watch what Jesus says over here in his 26th verse. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sow not, and gather where I have not straw. Thou ought to have therefore to have put my money to the exchanger, and then at my coming I should have received my own with the usury. Said, Take therefore that talent from him, and give it unto him which have 10 talents. For every one that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that have not, shall be taken away even that which he have. What I'm trying to tell you is, he's saying that person that utilizes it is going to get more. And that one that don't use his talent, even that which he have, is going to be taken away. Look in the church today. Some of you that sing won't even sing. Oh, I don't feel like it. God gave you a gift to sing, but yet you won't use it. Then all of a sudden you go to the doctor one day, you find out you got throat cancer. You know what happens then? You want to sing, but you can't sing. You that has other businesses, you got abilities in administration. Church, you need that too. But yet, you know what happened? God take that away from you too. You find yourself getting sick. You lose your mind. Something happened. And now you can't think. See, God knows how to reach everybody. See, because he said, For he that haveth, it shall be given. See, for you to use what you have, it's going to be given. For you that don't use what you have, even that you have, it's going to be taken away. And that's why one thing is that I use everything that God give me. Whatever he give me, I used it. And when you start using what you have, in the book of Mark, the 11th chapter, God tells us something. Come on, let's go to Mark 11. Because we have something called faith. Now, in order for you to use whatever you have, it takes faith to do it. Because a lot of times, we have insecurities. Folks that have the ability to do something, but they lack the faith to do it. They're scared. They're afraid of failure. They're afraid of coming up short. Well, I have a word for you all today, too. You have not failed until you try. And every person you know that is successful have failed. They failed, but they didn't quit. They didn't give up. And I found sometimes that they always say, if the Lord meant it for me, then this would not have happened. The Bible said the trying of your faith. See, your faith is going to be tried. Your faith is going to be tested. Yes. But it said, let patience have a complete work, that thou may be perfect and in time wanting nothing. You got to want it bad enough. The children of Israel, they went to battle with their own brother. And every time they went up, they got defeated. The first time they got defeated, they went to God again and said, should I go up against my brother Benjamin? The first time they went, they got defeated. The second time they went up, they got defeated. But that third time, sometimes it's a charm. You know what they did? This time they prayed. And this time they fast. And they went before God. And God says, I'm going to deliver them into your hands. See, that means that when they failed the first time, they didn't quit. The second time, they didn't quit. The third time, it was a charm. Because sometimes when you have gifts, you have abilities, you start out doing something, it doesn't work the way that you planned. You got to go back to the drawing board. You got to start all over again. And maybe that third time, it is a charm. I was reading about Walt Disney. Walt Disney, he knew he had abilities. He had a vision of creating. And you know, he had so many failed businesses, but he didn't ever quit. He kept utilizing his brilliant mind to create things. And your mind is like a dartboard. You got to keep throwing the darts because you don't know which one is gonna stick. You may fail in this one, you throw the next dart. You may fail in that one, you throw in the next dart. You know what Wall Street is like stock. Sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down. But you know, the one that's going to be successful don't get out the market. You know what he does? He stay in the market because he knows just like things go down. He know they got to come up. You know, those smart investors in times when things are bad, that's when they buy. Because they're buying for the future. So that when the market changes, that now they can begin to sell. See, that's when rich people make money. They make money off your pain. They make money off your suffering. You know why? Because they understand that now you're ready to sell it for nothing. But what if you hold on to it? What if you trust God in it? And says, a change is going to come. A change is going to come. It's going to get better. I'm not going to sell out. I'm going to stand there for the long haul. I'm not going to sell out my gift. I'm not going to sell out my abilities. I'm going to wait it out. And when the time is right, I'm going to seize the moment. The Bible said chance and opportunity come to every man. And when the time is right, your gift going to make room for itself and bring you before great men. So what do we have? We have faith. We have faith in our God that He's able to do exceedingly. We got faith in Him that if we would ask anything in His name, that He'll do it. That the Father may be glorified in the Son. He says, according to your faith, so be it done unto thee. So when we look in the book of Mark 11, and verse 20, isn't that something? God is so good all the time. When we begin to believe God, God can begin to do the things that only He Himself can do. Mark 11, verse 22. See, but what brought this on? Jesus went and there was a fig tree that was not producing fruit. He cursed that fig tree, and they remembered He cursed that fig tree. And because of that, they asked Him a question. And he responded. And Peter called in remembrance, this is in the 21st verse first, and said unto him, Master, behold, the fig tree which thou cursest is withered away. See, when you speak something by faith, out of your mouth proceeded blessings, out of your mouth proceeded curses. Every day we use faith. Someone get up and says, well, I'm finna go to the store. That's by faith. Person get up that next day says, I'm going to get up and I'm going to find me a job. That's by faith. See, you speak those things by faith. And you get up and you put it into action. You encourage yourself. And that's what it takes, encouraging yourself. Sometimes I'm laying in my bed, I'm thinking about things and what can I do? I'm going through trials, I'm going through tribulations in my life. And I begin to just lay back and I trust God. Begin to ask Him, what do He want me to do? And I got to have faith in him that when I get up, I got to put it to action. You know, Peter asked him a question. There was a storm in his life. And the storms was coming, the waves was coming. And he saw Jesus walking on the water. And Peter said, if it be thou, Lord, bid me to come. Now let me tell you something. How many of y'all ever walked on water? Have you ever seen anybody walk on water? Only two people you ever heard that walked on water. That was Jesus and Peter. Peter began to walk on the water when he stepped out by faith. When you step out by faith, you can accomplish things in which no one has ever accomplished by faith. When you utilize what you have, there's people that has faith, and there are those that has the gift of faith. Me, I have the gift of faith. I don't have a doctor's degree. I don't have a master's degree. But I got a Jesus degree in faith. Amen. And I use it every day. To believe that no weapon formed against me is going to prosper. No matter how you try, you won't be able to stop me. You won't be able to hinder me. Because the God I serve, I don't fight my battles. He fight them for me. And that's according to my faith. In the book of Mark 11:22, and Jesus answered and said unto him, have faith in God. That's how this is being done. Have faith in God. You want to utilize what you got? Have faith in God. Stop when you trust in God. Now, this 23rd verse says, for verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he said shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he says. Maybe you don't have nothing but faith today. Maybe that's all you need. The woman in the book of 1 Kings 17 chapter tells Elijah, I don't have nothing but these sticks and a handful of meal. And me and my son, we're going to utilize this and we're going to eat and we're going to die. He told her to give it to him. And then go and bake yourself a cake. But bake me one first. That's all she needed. In the book of 2 Kings, 6th chapter, this woman, husband died, which was a prophet. She came to the prophet Elijah. And he asked her, what do you have? She said, I ain't got nothing but a cruse of oil. He told her to go borrow vessels, not a few but many. And then go in your house, shut the door, and start pouring. And she borrowed a lot of vessels and she just started pouring. And she came and says, all the vessels is full. He says, now, go and sell. Go sell the oil you have. And then take the rest for you and your sons. See, sometimes you got to just use what you have. I want to encourage you today. Use this by YouTube. Use this by Facebook. Use this in here. Stop complaining and use what you have. Amen. You're listening to the Word of Faith Church of the Apostolic Faith. I'm Bishop Gerald A. Wade. And until next week, you be blessed in Jesus' name. Give God praise.